Hi, I'm Tina-Desiree Berg reporting for Status Coup News, and I'm bringing you this week's right-wing insanity report. No guest today, just me, and I'm going to walk you through some breaking news this week, some silly videos, and I also wanted to take a peek at an article I wrote about the San Diego Antifa case and show you some things that didn't actually make it into the article and talk a little bit about the things that did and give you background on that. I think it might be interesting not only to understand how, we make a sausage, so to speak, but also to look at some of the right-wing extremists that were there that day. We chose not to highlight them in the article because the article was about the case, but I do think it's relevant information and some interesting facts to share with you there. All right, so at the top, though, I wanted to bring your attention to something that's brewing with Steve Bannon. If you would recall, back in 2018, Steve Bannon and a couple of other individuals started a organization called We Build the Wall. The idea was they were going to do a GoFundMe, raise money, and basically privately build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Turned out it was a giant grift. So there were some charges that were brought in 2020. A couple of these guys went down, pled guilty. Steve Bannon was ultimately pardoned by then President Donald Trump. And now those charges are coming back. So I wanted to highlight a Guardian report that's just coming out today. So top former strategist Steve Bannon, he's facing these charges a second time, more fraud charges added. The expected move by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office was quietly communicated to Bannon in recent days. The sources said of the sealed indictment and indicated the state charges will likely mirror the federal case in which he was pardoned. Bannon and 3 others were charged in that case by federal prosecutors in Manhattan with falsely claiming that they would not take compensation in the private We Build the Wall fundraising effort to underwrite the part of the construction of the wall in the U.S.-Mexico border. We know that Kobach, one of the 3 of the founders, did take at least $350,000 for his personal use. He did plead guilty to that. So that was definitely determined. The question is how much did Bannon take and where did that money go? So the architect of Trump's 2016 election campaign and later White House advisor was accused of personally taking more than $1 million from what people had donated to the fundraising push and promised to secure funding in order to ensure the completion of the border wall. Bannon, alongside disabled veteran Brian Kobach, who I just mentioned, Andrew Bottolato, and Timothy Shea raised more than $25 million. That's right, folks, $25 million in the online crowdfunding effort, which also promised donors that all the proceeds would go towards constructing the wall. So part of the claim that they made was that they weren't going to take any of the funds for their personal use and that would all go into building the wall. Well, clearly that wasn't the case. So it remains to be seen what direction this is going in. Could be more serious, could be less serious. But Trump had pardoned him in 2020, and now, Trump's no longer president. And if they found deeper charges on fraud there could be more of a case. So I wanted to revisit one of the original Trump videos that he posted on Facebook in regards to the effort of We Build the Wall. Flashback Thursday, folks. Let's play that video, Colin.
We can rise above partisan politics in order to support national security. Some have suggested a barrier is immoral. Then why do wealthy politicians build walls, fences, and gates around their homes? They don't build walls because they hate the people on the outside, but because they love the people on the inside. The only thing that is immoral is the politicians to do nothing and continue to allow more innocent people to be so horribly victimized. This is a choice between right and wrong, justice and injustice. This is about whether we fulfill our sacred duty to the American citizens we serve. When I took the oath of office, I swore to protect our country, and that is what I will always do. So help me God.
So even though Trump wasn't actually affiliated with this particular 501c4, he was definitely, supporting this idea of building a wall. That was obviously one of his biggest campaign situations. He was against, stopping immigration, as a lot of the right wingers were. So this was all sort of in line. So when he pardoned Steve Bannon, I don't think it was much of a surprise, plus he was working with the campaign. The other thing to keep in mind is that Bannon was also just indicted by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg earlier for 2 counts of criminal contempt of Congress. So we're going to see how this plays out this week. It could be interesting. I also wanted to talk about one of the other individuals that was part of this story, Kris Kobach. We Build the Wall, right? So the reason he is important now is he is now running for office. He was the 31st Secretary of State of Kansas. He's now running for district attorney in the state. But here is one of his flashback videos related to We Build the Wall.
I've been involved in trying to stop illegal immigration for 2 decades, working with We Build the Wall to construct the first ever privately constructed border wall has been the most significant thing. This wall is stopping a huge amount of migrants being smuggled into the United States and drugs being smuggled into the United States. And there are many more gaps that need to be filled on the southern border. Places where, for whatever reason, the Army Corps of Engineers stopped short of the mountain and didn't start going up the side of the mountain. And that's where We Build the Wall comes in. We look for places where there is a half mile, a mile, 2 miles that can make a huge difference, an outsized difference. And we, the people, build it, and we're getting it done.
We had one price of $40 million in 2 years to build this project. We did it for $9 million, and we did it in 17 days.
So that was his video that he originally did with them, I think, believe in around 2019. He's still with the organization, believe it or not, and he's also running for office. I think this is relevant because if somebody goes into an attorney general position, they have a little bit more, overseeing more of the legal procedures in the state. That could be a very detrimental place for him to be. So I wanted to also take a look at that. Huffington Post recently did a piece on this gentleman because he's also obviously against abortion rights. So Kansas abortion nightmare isn't over yet. Extremist Kris Kobach running for state attorney general. So last week, Kansas voted by a double-digit margin to reject a referendum that would remove abortion protections from the state constitution, which is a good win for the abortion rights group. The historic pro-choice win dominated national headlines and quickly changed the political debate about abortion in a post-Roe world. But amid the booming victory lap of many abortion rights supporters, something else happened. Anti-abortion extremist Kris Kobach quietly won the Republican primary for state attorney general. Kobach has a long anti-abortion record, including being one of the lead proponents of the Value Them Both amendment that nearly 60% of Kansans voted against. A general election win for Kobach, a longtime ally of former President Donald Trump, would likely mean the fight for abortion rights in Kansas is far from over. Kris Kobach wants to make Kansas the most hostile state in the country for abortion rights, said Emily Trifone, the deputy communications director at Democratic Attorneys General Association. Kobach won the Republican nomination with just over 42% of the votes last week, beating out State Senator Kelly Warren and former federal prosecutor Tony Mativi. The win solidifies Kobach's comeback after losing a GOP nomination for an open U.S. Senate seat in 2020 and losing the governor's race to Kansas' current governor, Laura Kelly, in 2018, despite Trump's endorsement. As an attorney, Kobach first came to fame as the author of a very strict anti-immigration law in Arizona and later served as Kansas Secretary of State. His far-right anti-immigration views and calls for stricter voter ID laws catapulted him into national prominence during the Trump years, and his views on abortion have remained constant throughout his political tenure. So in addition to being, very much against, abortion rights, he is very much against immigration rights, which is why he actually supports this We Build the Wall thing. I also think it bears to keep in mind that this idea hasn't entirely gone away. It was very much part of, obviously, it was a cornerstone, I would say, of Trump's election campaign in his previous election. And if he does run again, if he does get past all of these legal hurdles and wins the GOP primary for president, I think it will once again become a centerpiece of his campaign. Because those ideas of anti-immigration, of white nationalism, of nationalist principles, they're still very much within the base of the GOP party, and also the Trump cult that still continues to support this guy around the country. So something to keep an eye on. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about something that has not gotten a lot of attention, but I think is still playing out across the country. Right-wingers have this thing about Soros-backed DAs. That's what they call them. So George Soros is obviously a billionaire philanthropist. He's obviously a investment banker, ran a hedge fund, very wealthy guy. And he's also Jewish. So we can criticize, maybe some of his bank stances and some of the corruption that might have been involved in that area without referring to, very anti-Semitic tropes. But these folks can't seem to do that. They constantly connect these two things. And then they also turn around and connect them to, of course, Antifa, because George Soros is who funds Antifa. This is just an old trope that has long existed in right-wing extremist circles. But there's like a bunch of DAs that they have, kind of gone after for this. We saw many of them get elected. And then after they got elected, we've seen a couple of recall campaigns against them. So I want to point out, this is the Daily Caller. It is very much a right-wing newspaper, very biased. It's definitely not, this is not a factually based thing here. This is, a newspaper that sort of reaches out and holds the grip of the right wing. So if you scroll down, you'll see that Soros, the most prolific Democratic donor, is most known for giving to President Clinton and Obama, but he has also been pumping money into a far-left effort to overhaul the criminal justice system by giving millions to a network of woke prosecutors in Democratic races. Among them is Kim Foxx, the state attorney for Cook County, Chicago, where murder is at the highest in nearly 30 years. So another thing that these guys want to connect these prosecutors to is, of course, increase in crime. And oftentimes these statistics or data are a little bit dubious because they are cherry picking where they're comparing the crime rates. For example, if you're looking at crime rates versus 2020 to 2022, there's going to be a clear and obvious jump simply because, well, everybody was in lockdown and, or a version of lockdown. We weren't in full lockdown, but people were definitely not out on the streets as much as they are now, again, that we're past sort of the first wave of COVID. So, that's one way to look at it. A second thing to keep in mind is that oftentimes they'll look at the statistical data, and if there was a small number of crimes, say there's 100 murders, and it jumps up, to 125, that's a 25% increase. So instead of saying we have 25 more, they're going to say this is huge, 25% increase. And oftentimes you'll see data where it's just less than that, right? Like there's 3 more of something than previously, but because the numbers were so small, it's a giant jump. So again, we're looking at sort of creating this fear-driven hyperbola that is surrounding these guys. They don't want criminal justice reform. Another thing that you'll see with these guys is they want to keep the bail system intact the way it is. Obviously, the progressive prosecutors are making a point that we can't do that because it's just not really fair. It's not just. We have people that are sitting in prison that have not even been to a trial yet simply because they cannot post bail. And that doesn't seem just, right? If you're too poor to post bail, what is your crime? Being poor? Like, that's it, right? So again, their idea is there's probably a more just way to go about these things without trying to force people to, make huge bail bonds that they cannot afford because they're poor. So there's legitimate reasons that these prosecutors are looking at these issues. But of course, the far right, they don't want that. They want to keep things as they are. They want to increase more time in prison and whatnot. All right. So I wanted to show you, they have this crime in Chicago, homicides in Philadelphia. They are focusing on, obviously, these DAs that they think are problematic. But if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a graph that shows George Soros' network of woke DA. So you've got, in Chicago, you've got Kim Foxx, and Philadelphia, you have Larry Krasner, who has been a very popular DA. And then over in Los Angeles, I wanted to talk about George Gascon for a second, because he has now survived 2 recalls, not 1, 2. So these guys keep coming at him, keep trying to get rid of him. And it's, they just want to keep things the way they are. So having said that, there's one DA that they are missing from this list that I also wanted to draw your attention to, because I think she has an even more egregious campaign based on the same idea of being George Soros DAs. Her name is Summer Stephan. She is down in San Diego. And she has now had her website deleted, but I also referenced it in the piece we're going to look at in a second. But she had some really crazy anti-Semitic campaign things on her website. So let's pull up this Daily Beast article that references it about dog whistles. Prosecutor going after Antifa peddled anti-Semitic George Soros conspiracies. So scroll down here. A district attorney pressing an unusual slate of conspiracy charges against anti-fascist protesters previously had a campaign site accusing philanthropist George Soros of funding anti-fascists to increase crime. San Diego County District Attorney Summer Stephan has brought a sweeping new conspiracy case against left-wing protesters who counter-demonstrated at a pro-Trump rally in San Diego on January 9th. The result was a beachside brawl, which is true, during which rally-goers on the right flashed a knife and a BB gun, and protesters on the left fired pepper spray. But rather than result in simple assault charges, Stephan is pressing conspiracy charges and only against demonstrators on the left. Okay, so we're going to talk about that in a second because I go in more in depth into this case. All right, so up on the screen now, you see an archive of Summer Stephan of her website. So it starts off saying San Diego public safety is under attack, right? So we're going to talk about anti-law enforcement money is coming to San Diego. Here you have a picture of George Soros, and he's in front of a photo taken at a protest of some black bloc anti-fascist supporters there. And she's basically insinuating that he's funding anti-fascist extremists, right? It's a war against law enforcement. So this is very fear-driven rhetoric that we're looking at. And now she's going after who her opponent is. This is Gwendolyn Jones-Wright. She was running as just a progressive prosecutor, saying we should reform bail. Maybe people shouldn't be serving life sentences for smoking pot. Many of the things that seem reasonable to most Americans, I think, at this point. But, Summer Stephan went on to paint her as this, against law enforcement, scary individual that was, going to come for your guns, was going to let out all of the criminals onto the street and, change your way of life. So that was a typical viewpoint of how the far right was framing these George Soros DAs, and it's still going on to this day. And I think going into the next election cycle, we're going to see more of that because I also think there's going to be more progressive DAs running. I think that this is not necessarily a trend that's going to stop, nor should it. But I also think there's going to be a backlash to it. And you're going to see many attacks on, the same things like crime rates are bad. One of the things that they used against George Gascon was a particular case it was an egregious act, was committed by somebody under the age of 18. George Gascon actually charged the most that he could under law for somebody that was underage, and it was 3 felonies. But, the sentences are much lower for somebody that's underage for obviously clear reasons to anybody that has a brain cell, right? But the far right, against Gascon campaign was saying that he was letting this person off scot-free and didn't care about crime, didn't care about the victim, none of which was true. I mean, he can't actually change the state law and increase the penalties for underage crime. So again, my point being is the way they frame the arguments, right? They're often disingenuous, maybe slightly have some facts going there, but not looking at the whole picture. Another example is when somebody says, well, he let them off immediately for something he did without looking at time served, right? Sometimes these guys have spent many months, sometimes over a year in jail waiting to be having their cases. And that time is called time served, and it's applied to whatever the final sentence is. So if you serve, 14 months in jail and you were sentenced to 18 months, you're only going to have 4 months left to serve on that. And somebody could look at that and say like, oh, he only served 4 months. Well, but that's not entirely true, right? So again, this is a battle of, I think, political will. People can distort the facts very easily to their benefit to make things look different from what they are. And the unfortunate reality is we absolutely do need to have criminal justice reform in the country. And, it's going to be a battle because those on the far right do not want that to happen for a host of reasons. So having said that, let's continue on our conversation with Summer Stephan because that parlays into the article I wanted to highlight for you that I wrote for the Daily Dot. Let's pull that up, and I'm going to walk you through the article, and I'm going to add some extra notes here that didn't make it in. And I'm going to play some videos and show you some documents that are in support of the things that were claimed. Sometimes when we write articles and we have things published, the editors see these things. They see the documents, they see the video evidence, but they don't always include it in the final publication. It's basically there to support the claims that are being made in case somebody wants to come back and say that that's a lie. So, but sometimes, it's good to look at that stuff. So let's take a look. Let's pull it up. Twisted Tea and far-right bloggers, how San Diego is waging an absurd war against Antifa. All right, so what was brought up in the initial part of that Daily Beast article was that this is the first time you're seeing conspiracy to commit charges being applied to a group of anti-fascist protesters. Basically, part of the claim made here is that this is an organized group, that they conspired to commit the riot crimes previous to that day, which means they communicated with each other, they did planning, they know each other. So there's a whole host of things baked into that are going to be really tough, in my opinion, to support, because anti-fascists are generally not organized. They're not an organization. It's a movement. So people might see a flyer and then show up at the protest because they see the flyer and they agree with anti-fascist principles, right? So part of what she said in her original indictment was that if they shared this post, if they clicked it, if they liked it on social media, that they were part of the conspiracy. I think that's incredibly far-fetched. So that's basically the basis for what she is claiming here. All right, let's look at the article. A grand jury in San Diego indicted 11 individuals for protest-related crimes of violence committed against supporters of former President Donald Trump. It's a case brought against anti-fascist protesters that's thorough in its absurdity. Recently, a prosecutor in San Diego attempted to strip the people charged of their constitutional rights, all because they purchased cans of Twisted Tea. I kind of went with this silly aspect of the lead there. The initial charges, most of which were originally brought in December of 2021, stem from a protest nearly a year earlier in the wake of the Capitol riot. Some of these individuals, whom the San Diego district attorney is prosecuting as part of a conspiracy to incite and participate in a riot in a campaign she is waging against Antifa, are facing longer sentences than many of the January 6th insurrectionists. This is actually true. It's kind of crazy. During the arraignment on June 7th, San Diego district attorney Summer Stephan requested that the judge grant a fourth waiver for the 11 defendants. Under such fourth waiver, citizens can lose their Fourth Amendment rights and can be the subject of warrantless searches and seizures. I think this is kind of a big deal, because basically saying, I'm going to take your Fourth Amendment rights away, that means any police officer at any time can just pull you over and search you without probable cause. You know, that protection is stripped from you. I think it's a big deal to try to go after those kinds of charges for protest crimes. I think generally speaking, the things that occurred that day was a mutual fray between two fractions, right? You had, right after the January 6th, it was January 9th, so 3 days later, you had a riled up Trump crowd. It was a Stop the Steal rally. So, you know, many of the people that were there actually had participated at the Capitol insurrection, at least 6 that I'm aware of. Were present, and you had a very large group of anti-fascists and people that were against Donald Trump. Not everybody there was, you know, Antifa necessarily, because they were angry about what they had seen 3 days earlier at their Capitol, right? To them, this was like, you guys are trying to overturn our democracy. We're not going to have it. So obviously, you have an environment where there's going to be arguments, there's going to be fights, there's a lot of attention. So, you know, protest crimes happen. Should people be charged with protest crimes? I'm not going to say no, but do they need to be charged with conspiracy to commit and face, you know, 20 plus years in jail for it? I think that's a little bit ridiculous. All right. So during that the June 7th, when she was taking away the Fourth Amendment rights, or asking for that, the judge did grant it in some cases and didn't in others. You know, part of the reasons, the ones that were granted with that either had pending cases or, you know, other things attached to that. So the judge listened to each one of these individuals separately, as opposed to one group and saying, this is what I'm assigning to all of you. All right. So part of her argument centered on her claim that the individuals charged over the protest stopped along the way in order to arm themselves with weapons. So I remember sitting in the gallery at that moment thinking, like, wow, okay, is there something I didn't know about? Maybe they were armed, some of them had guns or something, because when you say weapons to me, that means I'm picking up something that is exclusively going to be used as a weapon. In the heat of a moment, any object can be used as a weapon. Does it mean that object is actually a weapon? I'm going to say no. I think these are two different things. So when she went on to list the items that she was referring to, one of the things she listed was full alcoholic beverage cans of Twisted Tea. And obviously for that reason, people started laughing in the back of the courtroom. The bailiff ended up ejecting, you know, a couple of people for laughing. But that was sort of showed you where the mentality was with this case. I mean, They stopped at a 7-Eleven and picked up a 6-pack of Twisted Tea, and that is them picking up weapons. Did they have the intention of using the Twisted Tea as weapons? Yeah, maybe, that's definitely possible, but I don't think it's the same thing as people stopping off at a gun shop and picking up guns per se. I also wanted to bring something to your attention that she said during the trial. She made the point of claiming that Twisted Tea was something that had special meaning for Antifa, and that's just absolutely not the case. So if you don't know the history of that, I do talk a little bit about it in the article. Twisted Tea became a pop cultural phenomena in late 2020 when a man from Ohio, you'll remember Barry Allen, aka TKO, smacked a drunk white man in a convenience store with his can after the man made repeated racist remarks toward him. So we can click through to the video of that, and so people can refresh their memory, because this was very much a viral video. All right, so that was the birth of the Twisted Tea meme, and I actually do think it would be considered a meme now. I think it's more a statement on American culture in general than it is on just Antifa. And in fact, Oath Keepers on January 6th, 3 days earlier, were also carrying cans of Twisted Tea. One of them, a group of California Oath Keepers that have now been arrested and indicted by the FBI. One of them, Tony Martinez, we're going to play a video of him discussing Oath Keepers, whatnot. And then I'm going to show you some photos of him and his crew with their cans of Twisted Tea. Let's play the Tony Martinez video.
Tonight, you guys, not only do you have the Southern California 3%ers here, but you also got the Lake Elsinore backyard bone bashers. We don't take no shit. I mean, my old lady could have taken those guys out, and that's no joke.
Oh man, that little guy, that one little guy, he just needed a sandwich. He was so skinny and so frail and so angry.
Oh, they were, hey, but did you see how quick they got triggered? The second they seen the Trump stuff, dude, they called all their people.
No. The second they saw him.
Yes. Kryptonite.
All right, so that is Tony Martinez and several Oath Keepers. The police chief from La Habra, Hofstadter, was with that group. Anyway, let me show you some photos of them at the Capitol on January 6th, and you will see them with their giant cans of Twisted Tea around their flak jackets. So it's basically a flak jacket, body armor. You also see a 3%er patch on the right. That's the black patch with the Roman numeral 3 there. There's a can of Twisted Tea. That's Tony Martinez right there. We have a second photo. Or did I not? Yeah, Ronald Malee. Ronald, yeah, there we go. He's with that group. You can see him actually holding the can of Twisted Tea in that one. So when the Capitol Sedition Hunters were looking for this group of Oath Keepers, in fact, they garnered the name Twisted Tea Posse. That was what they were referred to as. So again, my point being here is that Summer Stephan made the claim that Twisted Tea was something that was, part of the Antifa culture, and it's absolutely not. It's definitely part of the fighting culture that is occurring between these two factions in the United States of America. I would say this is a meme of America currently. All right, so back to the article. All right, so people sitting in the public gallery burst into laughter at the tea reference, prompting the bailiff to eject 2 individuals. All right, but the concerns over cans of tea are emblematic in the past year in San Diego, as their district attorney and police department have taken a campaign against Antifa to far-fetched new heights, using the state to further harass individuals facing charges, getting information on suspects from right-wing YouTube channels, angling for $1 million bail requests for petty crimes, and subpoenaing anonymous Twitter accounts. It's all in an effort to quell people who have come out in numbers to stand against far-right supporters of Trump. So I do think that this is the case. I think the ultimate goal here with a lot of these prosecutions is to just quell First Amendment free speech, quell protests. If you arrest enough people and make the charges high enough, so thinking goes, fewer of them will come out on the streets and protest stuff. And we've seen this with the BLM protests as well. All right, Summer Soros in San Diego. The San Diego district attorney at the center of all of this, Summer Stephan, has not hidden her disdain for the left. A now deleted campaign website shows several photos of Antifa activists behind George Soros with a caption that states her then opponent backs anti-law enforcement candidates over experienced prosecutors trying to tip the balance to criminals. So that's the campaign site that we talked about earlier. Here was a tweet in which she actually tweeted out the campaign site. So she was obviously fine with it. That tweet was not deleted. It's still up. Stephan did not respond to multiple requests for comment from Daily Dot. This is true. I emailed her office 3 times. I emailed one of the deputy DAs once. I heard back from him, but he wasn't willing to answer any questions or comment on anything. So again, they were given that opportunity. All right. So the conspiracy theory that Holocaust survivor George Soros funds Antifa to foment unrest in the nation has long been a canard of the far right. This isn't the first time Stephan has thrown the book at left-wing protesters either. Stephan charged Black Lives Matter activist Denzel Drawn with 19 felonies and held him on $750,000 in bail in August 2020. His charges, like the Antifa defendants, centered around protest crimes, including the use of mace. Drawn was eventually acquitted of all charges by a jury. So this was another case of this. So she charged this guy with the book, 19 felonies. It was a protest that he was at, every charge related to that particular protest. And she requested an insane amount in bail, $750,000. I mean, this is something you would see with very serious charges normally. So this is not the first, my point being is there's a pattern here. This is not the first time she's gone after the left-wing activists. She's done it time and time again. She also went out into public and basically said that she was changing her party affiliation from being GOP to not being part of any party because she felt like people thought maybe she had a bias in her prosecutions because of her party affiliation. Come on, Summer. My point to you would be like, that's not entirely the case. The bias is there even if you drop the GOP after your name. Just because you re-register as NPP doesn't mean you're still not going to have those biases. So this was kind of a superficial Band-Aid that she was putting on the wound at that point. And she's also gone after George Gascon. They had joint prosecutions over a couple of cases, and she was adamant about having those cases coming back to San Diego and not being jointly prosecuted because he was one of these, Soros-backed DAs, so to speak. All right. The deputy DA assigned to the case, William Hopkins, tackled this case with an attitude of antagonism towards the defendants, filing a motion regulating the release of discovery to which the court agreed, hampering defense lawyers. All right, so what on earth am I talking about here, you're asking? So filing a motion regulating the release of discovery. During a criminal trial, the defense attorney is allowed to have access to the documents the DA possesses or will be using in the court case. That's just part of the way our legal system is set up. It's a good thing. They have a right to know what the case is that is going to be brought against them, right? So that they can build an adequate defense. So she asked that this motion was basically not allowing the defense attorneys to sit down with their clients and go through these case files with them. They were not allowed to give them copies of them. They couldn't email them to them. Their only options were to have them look at them and then not take copies with them, or to do it through like Zoom or something where they could just discuss it over Zoom. They weren't allowed to actually share any of these documents with their clients. I think that's bad. So I think part of what's being argued currently in the case, even though the case was supposed to come to trial this week, it's not coming to trial to next January. But my understanding is that this has definitely been part of the issue. I would imagine that at some point, one of the defense attorneys is going to make some sort of argument against this hampering of not allowing them to use discovery with their clients. But we'll see where that goes. But again, this is an unusual request to make. It is certainly out of bounds for the level of what should be, more or less protest crimes to be doing this. But again, she's trying to, really trump charges up here. All right. So Hopkins claimed defendants would use information released to them to commit further violence in a document filed with the court in December 2021. All right. This is Hopkins from his support statement. As a deputy district attorney, through the investigation of this case, I have come across several gigabytes of data that the Antifa cells to which the defendants belong have collected on persons they have had any sort of disagreement with. I know that members of Antifa specifically use this information to harass, attack, and stalk victims in order to socially, psychologically, and physically harm their targets. I am aware that several of the defendants and their affiliates have engaged in this type of behavior within their respective Antifa cells. Okay. Number one, there's no such thing as an Antifa cell. Let's just start with that. There are no cells. This is not a formal organization. They just don't exist. I know that this is a popular notion that Andy No has put forth, but it's completely ridiculous. Included with this protective order were photos of some of the things that he was referencing. I will tell you what those are. There was police reports that are publicly available. And these were police reports against some of these right-wing extremists that have been arrested for some very serious crimes. There were, Twitter posts, videos from public protests that anybody has access to. So the point I'm making here was there was nothing that was like particularly egregious or hidden, in my opinion. These are things, in fact, that if you walked into my office right now, you would find many of the same things. I'm not harassing or stalking people. That's part of the research that I do as a journalist, right? And a lot of these folks that are part of the anti-fascist movement do research. I mean, they've been responsible, as many of you know, for figuring out who a lot of the Capitol insurrectionists were, for example. So I don't think that this is a fair statement to be trumping it up this way. All right. So although he refers to the movement as having cells, multiple times Hopkins provided no clear evidence that the case defendants knew each other, but still tamped down discovery over a fear that information would be provided to other members of Antifa and that it would endanger the safety of witnesses and victims in the present case. So he's basically arguing that all of these guys are sharing their information, and if they share this information, people that are not charged in this particular case but are part of the cell are going to go out and do some violence against these individuals. But there's absolutely no evidence that that's the case. Where's the evidence that they even knew each other? I've spoken to several of these guys, and I can assure you that a bunch of them had not even met until that day. So this vast conspiracy that Williams thinks exists, it just doesn't exist. All right. So according to the indictments, on or about January 2nd, 2021, Antifa supporters posted on social media calling for counter-protesting and direct action in response to a scheduled political demonstration in Pacific Beach on January 9th, 2021. Defendants and other uncharged co-conspirators confirmed their support and participation by showing up in Pacific Beach on January 9th, 2021, dressed in black clothing and armed with weapons and protective gear, before participating in the violence described below. It says a defendant initiated attack by shouting, "Proud Boy, Killa." This is true. That's exactly the words this guy used in his paperwork. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. Dressed in black clothing, that's part of the conspiracy. Again, lots of people wear black clothing. I think you're going to have a hard time building a conspiracy case based on saying dressed in black clothing. And I would also point out that oftentimes you will see Trump supporters and other right-wing extremists also dressing in black bloc. They do it too. It is not Proud Boys even. I've seen them dressed up in black bloc with the same black things over their heads. So this again is not something that is exclusive to anybody on the left. So even though she's saying that it is. Again, the other thing is I want to mention that the tension that day was really, really high, right? This was 3 days after the Capitol insurrection. And in addition to that, this is San Diego. So there had been, as many folks know, I had filmed this. There had been a large protest in downtown LA where a hate crime was committed against Berlindo Nebo. And I know for a fact that one of those, actually two now, I've found a second one, that were involved with Berlindo Nebo's attack were also present at Pacific Beach on January 9th. So again, these guys were not these innocent bystanders that were all victims, as Summer Stephan is pointing them out to be. All right, protest on the pier is the next section of the article. Despite Congress having certified the 2020 election at the D.C. riot, ardent Trump supporters still organized Stop the Steal rallies across the country. The mood was tense on January 9th, 2021, just 3 days after the far right stormed the U.S. Capitol in an effort to overturn the 2020 election. At least 6 people who are present in D.C. and who have been active at protests throughout Southern California were on site. One of them is Proud Boy Albert Nunez, and he also goes by Alberto Nunez. I'm not sure which is correct. We decided Albert Nunez was the way to go. But he runs the camera for far-right ring streamer named Jess Weber. Weber is now known for posting a video at the Capitol on January 6th while holding the riot shield of a Capitol Police. Others were members of the new group New Patriot Wave, whose logo appeared in the event flyers and who can be seen in the videos throughout that day. All right, so I want to play a couple videos here. So the first video, we can click through to Weber, who is at the Capitol, and he is holding the riot shield. I know many people have seen this video already, but just as a refresher so you know who it is that I'm talking about.
All right, guys, we are at the Capitol
Capitol right now. We're gonna go back in. We got nice. I'm the only one with a shield, so I don't know why no one else brought a shield, but I brought one just in case they start shooting. So make sure if you ever take over the Capitol or any other big place, make sure you bring a shield. You can't get this anywhere except for the cops' hands. All right, guys, thanks for watching.
All right, so that was Jess Weber. Now I want to play a video of that Albert Nunez filmed that day in which they are assaulting one of the counter-protesters in an alley.
Sleep in this alley.
What would you do if you had one of those moments? What would you do?
Okay, so we're surrounded. This is where all my homeless people sleep. This is where all my friends sleep, right here.
Go ahead, start swinging, motherfucker, because you get
No justice, no peace bullshit. Fuck you and your bullshit ass fucking reason for being out here.
No.
What's up, dude? What's up?
Oh my God! Whoa!
That's it.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it right now! Get off of him!
Fall back.
Yeah! You guys! My homeless friends sleep right here! Stop it! Do you know how many people live in this alley?
All right, so that's just one of many problematic videos from that day. So you can clearly see that it wasn't one-sided. It was absolutely a mutual fray. Right after that, Albert Nunez posted a shot on his Telegram that I want to show you. His Telegram is Party Boy Berto. Couldn't get that out. And he's basically showing his angle of that video, and it says San Diego KO knockout of Antifa leader at Pacific Beach. All right, so that's from his Telegram. All right, so let us also play a second video. I'm going to just show you a couple of clips from that day so you can get an idea of what was going on. In this video, you can see the Trump supporters marching through Pacific Beach through a shop area, and one of them stops to do a Sig Heil.
Fucking terrorists, fucking communists.
So that gives you an idea of what these guys were like. And then I also want to play a third video that did not make it into the article, but I do think it does provide some background. We're just going to play the first 3 minutes of this. This was some right-wing streamers that had been on the Trump side. They were streaming this as it was going. You can hear like a little beep sound, and then you'll hear people talking. So what this clarifies for me is that all of these folks were using some sort of communication system in their ears, and they were coordinating in some respect. So let's play like the first 3 minutes of this.
Location I just said is my current location. Alright, just watch 3 cops go down the block. Not sure what street it is, but the Patriots are on the line right now with Antifa with the cops in between. They're all on the way.
I don't do that. He just
All right, so that'll just give you an idea that absolutely these folks they knew what they were doing. Let's not pretend that they didn't, even though the DA apparently thinks that they weren't also involved in coordinated attacks against their opponents, the political opponents. They certainly were, and it was certainly a mutual fray. All right, back to the article. By early morning, a large group of counter-protesters was occupying the pier where the rally was scheduled to take place. And as small groups of Trump supporters showed up, they were confronted and chased away. Eventually, these confrontations escalated and multiple fights, which included the use of pepper spray, broke out. So, yeah, again, what I'm saying here is there was a mutual fray. The anti-fascists were definitely using pepper spray against the Trump supporters. There were definitely fist fights that were happening. But my point is that it isn't that there wasn't fighting going on between two political opponents. The point that I'm making is that the DA is still insisting that it was not a mutual fray, that it was one side committing all of the violence, and that the other side are just some hapless victims. That's absolutely the language that she's using in both her press releases and indictment. And I just don't understand how she can make that case. All right. So at one point, a mob of Trump supporters surrounded and assaulted a counter-protester in the alley. We just talked about this. Nunes posted the video on his Telegram account with the caption, "San Diego KO of Antifa leader at Pacific Beach." But when the initial charges hit, Stephan stated in a press release, video evidence analysis shows that overwhelmingly the violence in the incident was perpetrated by the Antifa affiliates and was not a mutual fray, with both sides crossing out of lawful First Amendment expression and into riot and violence. Not one far-right protester was charged that day or has been charged up until now. There has been no charges brought against any of these guys on the right. Included in the court filings is an order for the alleged victims of the acts by alleged Antifa members to release their medical records to the court, filed on April 18th, 2022. Not all of the names were redacted when the Daily Dot acquired these documents from the court clerk. On June 2nd, however, the judge sealed them. All right, so I basically drove down to San Diego on a couple of occasions to get my hands on these court documents. The first time I wasn't able to get as many as the second time, but I did find in a related case file, not the one on this particular case, because there's multiple cases related that have been wound together here. I did find multiple documents that listed the names of the alleged victims. So I know who some of those folks are. And I think that was important information for me to get, because one of them, Ryan Luke, I have video of on multiple times that day with him wielding a knife, pulling a knife out and wielding against anti-fascists. So we're going to talk about that now. One of the alleged victims is identified in the documents as Ryan Luke, and he can be seen in video near the counter-protesters with a large knife. He is an ex-Pacific Beach Guardian Angel. The Guardian Angels is an organization formed in New York in the 1970s to run citizen-led safety patrols on the subways. Many view them as a vigilante group. Police event logs have him walking around with a knife at about 2:26 p.m. And I do have a copy of that police log, Colin, if you want to put it on the screen for a second. So you're going to see 5 or 6 different references to a male with a knife throughout the day, because he did have it at multiple occasions out of his, he had it, on his body, and then he would take it out and wield it. So they were aware that this guy had a knife. This isn't coming out of left field. All right. So male with knife, WLM, white male, black hoodie, brown pants, reads the description. So this is 2:26. As far as I can derive this time code, this is when the incident 5 happened that is named in the indictment. All right. In an additional video from that day, Luke can be seen confronting homeless activist Amy Zamato. Zamato told the Daily Dot that he has been violent with the unhoused population there on more than one occasion, noting that the local Guardian Angels even kicked him out because he is so rogue. So I did speak with a local down there, a couple actually, but she was willing to go on record, and she gave me some of her video. All right, so let's play this video. Trump supporter brandishes knife at Pacific Beach.
Take his shit! Take it, homie! That's all shit, homie! He's got a knife! He's got a knife! He's got a knife!
All right, so, and that wasn't the only time I saw video of him with the knife out. Amy had some video of him earlier in the day where he had a knife. So this guy was walking around with a knife. And I don't see how you don't take that into consideration when looking at the crimes here committed. Basically, back to the article, their altercation described as Attack 5 in one of the indictments starts by stating that defendant Jeremy White pointed out Luke to other co-conspirators. The indictment makes no mention of the knife. It goes on to describe a scene in which Luke and Kokaza, which is one of the other named victims on the medical release, are surrounded and assaulted with tear gas and a stick, and in which Luke's bike is vandalized. So that's partially what this video captured, is what they are describing in this indictment. So I don't know. Looks like mutual fray to me. All right. So the original indictment lists 68 different overt acts by the protesters charged that day, including 12 different citations for putting on black clothes. It also details charges such as swinging a skateboard, using tasers, and 2 different instances of someone chucking a twisted tea. All right, so let me go into some background here, because the story of these charges doesn't begin on January 9th. There was an earlier case that happened in October in which 2 of the same co-defendants were charged, having to do with protests against police brutality. On October 31st, 2020, the San Diego Police Department arrested 6 individuals for conspiracy to commit a crime, among other lesser charges, at a small protest in front of police headquarters. The protest was centered on justice for Jose Castro Gutierrez, who was shot and killed by an officer while experiencing a mental health crisis. The protest escalated when a metal barrier separating the police from the protesters fell over, falling toward protesters and not the police, according to multiple eyewitnesses. There does not appear to be any public video available of the event, and the police body-worn camera footage has been sealed by the court via a protective order. I did try to get that footage. 2 of the individuals arrested that day were Jesse Cannon and his partner, Liam Modbach. Cannon is also a defendant in the current January 9th Antifa case. While recalling the incident, Modbach told the Daily Dot one officer pointed at Jesse and our friend and said 1016 those 2. 1016 can be the police code for picking up a prisoner. Jess ran away from the police, although the police gave no commands, Modbach said. An officer chased Jesse and he tripped onto his back, falling on top of him. Several officers dogpiled him. I stood frozen when I was suddenly shoved to the ground, landing on my wrist. An officer ripped my mask off and screamed at me. Another officer handcuffed me and took me to a police vehicle where I was searched. I watched another officer force a DNA swab on another man who was arrested. They shoved the swab in his mouth, grabbing his jaw forcefully. The January 9th indictment said that Cannon was previously provided a DNA sample. According to Cannon, back at the station, he was sat in a chair while multiple officers watched a doxing video of him created by popular San Diego right-wing blogger Roger Ogden, who has once threatened a BLM activist with pepper spray. He was caught on video doing this. But I want to play a segment of this video that they mentioned, because it's kind of a wild thing. I mean, here you have a DA and a police force that's seems to be very concerned about Antifa doxing right-wing individuals. Let me show you a video of a very well-known San Diego right-winger doxing an Antifa guy, because again, her case seems to be one-sided, biased, and she doesn't seem to be able to see like the full picture of what's going on here. So let's play a little bit of this so you get an idea of what they were looking at. All right, so you get the idea there. This video goes on for, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. But apparently the police watched this video and decided that Jesse was Antifa. All right. So Cannon had multiple injuries following the incident. He did send me photos of his injuries, and they actually were quite extensive. He had scrapes, cuts, bruises, all kinds of things up and down his body, on his head. So it was definitely quite a tackle that he had experienced. The conspiracy to commit a crime charges for October 2020 were eventually dropped, while other lesser charges remained. So my point here is that she was trying to tag conspiracy to commit charges as far back as October, but wasn't really able to get those off the ground until the January 9th thing happened. Cannon seems to be a regular target of police scrutiny. Madback told the Daily Dot the police knew of Jesse's former affiliation with the local cop watch group and have targeted him for it. Cannon said he hasn't been a volunteer with his cop watch group for quite some time. In February 2021, Cannon was detained and handcuffed on the Pacific Beach boardwalk for several minutes before being released. A passerby filmed the incident while making inquiries of one of the officers. In the video, the officer claims they are looking for protesters that vandalized property at the January 9th protest. Cannon was eventually released that day. So I was able to acquire this video from somebody that was, basically filming it with their phone camera that day. So let's take a look at that.
What's he being arrested for, officer? Excuse me? What's he being arrested for? For what? He looks like a suspect? What did the suspect do? I live in the neighborhood. If there's somebody that's... Sorry, I want to keep my distance because of COVID. I just want to keep my distance because of COVID. Okay. Is there somebody else being dangerous? Is there somebody else being dangerous? What was the offense of the suspect? I raised my kid around here. I want to know what's going on.
Yeah, sure. It's, what happened a couple weeks ago.
Oh, the gunshot? Or the kid that got shot at the party?
No, not that.
Oh. What was it?
During all the protests over here?
From the protest? From which one?
The one from January 9th.
What did he supposedly do? I guess I'm just trying to figure out what people are doing. I'm just trying to figure out what people are doing in my neighborhood. What did he... Oh, I thought there was something specific. You just protesting here?
So it was because of the protest a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
So we're trying to identify some of the people that vandalized and stuff.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know. You too.
Okay, so basically he was at that point saying that he was looking for people that had vandalized things, which is not the case. I don't know, maybe it was at that particular moment in time. They hadn't come up with a full indictment yet, but kind of a strange thing. So they detained him for a good 10, 15 minutes and they let him go. On March 25th, now we're at March 25th, 2021, the San Diego Police Department pulled Cannon and Modbach over while they were out running errands. Police searched her vehicle thoroughly, at one point holding up and photographing a sweatshirt that says Cop Watcher on it. So there was a running dash cam inside the car. So we were able to get some of the search that the police did that day. So let's go ahead and play that video.
Want to do her seatbelt for me, or we're gonna have you step on out?
You want me to get my?
On you or anything
No. Do you want me to get my ID?
No.
Can I get it now in case you want it? No, I don't want you to go in my car.
We're gonna search for it anyway, so go ahead and step on out.
Do you have a warrant?
We do. So go ahead and undo your seatbelt.
All right. Can I close my windows first?
I'll take care of that.
Oh, okay, wait. Before you search my car, I would like to see the warrant.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
But you're gonna need to step on out.
All right, but I want to close my window.
Get out of the car. The detective will tell you everything, and we'll go from there.
Okay, don't open my car.
Stay right here.
Until you have a warrant, and I want to see it.
That's fine. We will.
I'm sorry, actually. Wait, hold on. Can I lock my phone? I don't want to record anything. Lock it inside.
I'll take a picture of it. Anything you find that like interesting, let me know, and I'll happily get a picture of it. Yeah, actually, that's that's good. Thank you.
All right, so that's went on for another 20 minutes, but you get the idea. So importantly, the warrant was sealed, so it wasn't really clear what they were looking for or under what grounds or any information whatsoever. They were provided with a list of things that were taken for inventory. On that list, you see phones, cameras, electronic equipment, things of that nature. All right, back to the article. Later that same day, they also ransacked Cannon's home, Madback's home, and Cannon's father's home under a sealed warrant. Police confiscated cameras, phones, and electronic equipment. Police additionally confiscated 2 legal firearms from Cannon's father's home. So there were 2 legal firearms at Cannon's father's home. They were legally owned, so I'm not sure why they confiscated them, but they did. On April 7th, well, we know now, I'll tell you why. On April 7th, 2021, San Diego police officer Colton Hoffricher left a voicemail for Cannon on Madback's phone. Since they had confiscated Cannon's phone in the raid, Hoffricher wanted to set up a meeting to serve Cannon with a gun violence restraining order. Yet the police had already confiscated his guns in the raid, and Cannon has no known gang affiliation or history of domestic violence. I'm not really clear what the basis is for asking for a gun violence restraining order. When I was given copies of the paperwork that they were given, they were absolutely blank. So there was no petitioner on there. There was nothing. There were literally blank documents. And I can't understand how that is legal. But apparently in San Diego, I'm told that this happens with some frequency. So Cannon and Madback were also the subject of San Diego's efforts to get to the bottom of who ran the San Diego Against Fasc Twitter account, which the DA said was used to organize the protest. Now, I have spoken to the owner of this account. It's not either of those 2 individuals. So there had also been a federal subpoena related to Twitter for the same account that had happened a couple months earlier that I had seen. That was related to something else, nothing to do with January 9th. But point being is I found it odd that they were trying to say that this account was run by Madback and Cannon when there was clearly an individual that did own it. I spoke with the individual's attorney. So that's how I got that information. I am also aware that Jesse Cannon is or was romantically involved with Leah Madback. I have seen evidence that both Cannon and Madback run and or have administrative privileges for several Antifa-based social media accounts, specifically San Diego Against Fasc, SD Reporting Collective, Snail, and Rabbit. Hopkins said in his protective order. So there's multiple social media accounts here. This matters for their case because, again, they're trying to say the conspiracy sort of is related to people liking and sharing a post on social media. This is like the thinnest of margins to make that case, in my opinion. I don't think you can do it successfully. All right, so that post that Hopkins was referring to that doxed victims came in response to a thread from Antifa Watch, which was posting itself about the case. So why am I bringing this up? If you go back and you look on Twitter at this case, the one that the DA actually screenshot and put inside the protective order was literally a response to an account named Antifa Watch, which is clearly a right-wing run account, doxing the anti-fascists from that day. So, I mean, how hypocritical can you get? You're basically telling me you're concerned that these Antifa cell members are going to like and share information about all of these right-wingers that might be victims and, yada, yada, yada. And then what you're using as evidence is quite literally a response to a right-wing account that is absolutely doxing anti-fascist members. And that's what this thread was. So it just struck me as being completely hypocritical, but entirely on brand for this entire case. All right. So the post that Hopkins was referring to that doxed victims in the response to a thread is to a thread from Antifa Watch, which was posting itself about the case. The post by SD Against Fash involves public video clips that the DA referenced in initial charging documents. So again, these were videos that were floating around Twitter, right? On Facebook and whatnot. They were publicly available. Anyone could see them. The first defendant to be arrested after the January 9th protest was Brian Lightfoot. Lightfoot was originally charged in May, with the remaining defendants charged at the December hearing. At that time, the district attorney requested, are you ready for this? $1 million in bail, an amount on par with crimes such as first-degree murder. She absolutely went into the court and asked, I still can't believe it, asked that Brian Lightfoot be held on $1 million in bail. That is an insane amount of money to be asking. And quite frankly, the judge was a little bit shocked. At the bail hearing on May 25th, 2021, the state argued that Lightfoot was a potential flight risk because he had access to firearms, had a fundraiser for his bail, had posed in photos in front of expensive cars, and had hired an attorney that resides in Northern California. Included as proof were photos of Lightfoot posing with toy guns. I do have a copy of that I want to show you. It is a 1920s style Tommy gun. It's clearly a toy. This is clearly a toy gun. It's a Tommy style gun that you would see in a 1920s gangster film. This is from, I believe, his Instagram. Anyway, I think it's kind of ridiculous that is what they're using as proof of him, being a flight risk. And as far as posing in front of expensive cars, we've all done things like this. You're out and about, you see something cool, you're like, I'm going to snap a shot for my Instagram. Using these things as saying that he needs $1 million in bail as a flight risk is just absolutely absurd. Obviously, the judge agreed with me because he did not grant that. He was let go on his own recognizance that day. Anyway, so that's where we're at today. The trial was supposed to start August 8th, which is tomorrow, or today. We're watching this on Thursday. And that got postponed until January. So we have a few months here before this trial starts. But that's just a rundown of what's going on. I do want to take a moment to show you also some additional things related to that didn't make it into the article that I think are of importance. There was another video that day of a guy named Chad Alvarez, and he walked out in front of the police skirmish line, and he basically pulled out the top of a smoke grenade and threw it at the anti-fascists right in front of the police, and the police did nothing. Let's go ahead and play that photo or a video.
I'm sorry? Tell him to take off his cap. I think he's a Trump supporter.
So here's another example of a right-winger doing something out of pocket that clearly crosses the line from First Amendment right, free speech, into doing something else, and the police did absolutely nothing. But let me take this one step further. I've got some evidence here that came out through a FOIA request. Let's put this on the screen. So this is basically a special bulletin. Attempt to identify SDPD Mobile Field Force witnesses, Pacific Beach Civil Unrest 1921, right? So this is put out by the sheriff and the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So if you scroll down, you see that his name is blacked out. That's Alvarez. That's Chad Alvarez with device. SDPD MFF officers on scene, device being kicked by SDPD. So here's the synopsis on 1/9/21, San Diego police officers responded to the area of Mission Beach Boulevard and Hornblende Street during a civil unrest incident in a mobile field force capacity. Prior to about 1423 hours, the subject of an ongoing Joint Terrorism Task Force investigation, is Chad Alvarez, I'm going to say his name even though it's redacted, was protesting on the pro-Trump side south of the SDPD mobile field force line. Alvarez was armed with an unknown burning munition canister, likely military-type smoke, CS or CN grenade, then ran along the east curb line of the mobile field force line, threw the canister north into the group of black-clad protesters and fled on foot. The canister can be seen via open-source video footage, producing a burning agent as it was thrown. The canister is then kicked back towards the SDPD officers who deflect the device towards the east curb line. I am attempting to identify the SDPD officers who witnessed the incident and determine if their body-worn cameras were activated at the time. SDPD body-worn camera footage documented Alvarez at the scene after the incident took place at about 1423 hours. Please review the attached video for further details. It's the video I just played for you. It's the same video. And contact SD Detective Phillips with any information. Okay, so basically this guy was being investigated already by the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I can show you also the email that came along with that in the FOIA request. This was an attachment, actually. So this is how we do investigative journalism here, right here. All right, so please forward to all sworn SDPD personnel. See the attached bulletin and open source video clip for SDPD internal use only. SDSO Detective Jason Phillips is attempting to locate SDPD officers at the intersection of Mission Boulevard and Hornblende Street in the Pacific Beach area on 1921. Please, it goes on to say, please contact San Diego Sheriff's Joint Terrorism Task Force. So what I will say about this guy, I don't know why they are looking for him. I don't know why he is the subject of an investigation. That remains to be seen. I'm still looking into it. I do know that I have found photos of him with known Peckerwoods. I have found a photo with him where he's actually also wearing a Peckerwood shirt. So there might be some affiliation with that. That's just me thinking out loud right now. That's not entirely backed up or sourced. The photos of him with these people is real. The Peckerwood shirt he's wearing is real. Whether or not it's related, I do not know. But again, this paints another, aspect of the situation. This is clearly not mutual fray. I mean, clearly not one side against another. It's mutual fray, right? People organizing, getting into political beefs, and these guys are not entirely innocent. And it just blows my mind that the DA is ignoring some of this evidence. All right. Let's shift gear now to some crazy stuff that happened this week. Laura Loomer is having an absolute meltdown. And it wouldn't be the first time Laura Loomer has had a meltdown, but she recently lost her primary. And basically, I'll let her tell you in her own words. Here's Laura Loomer's video.
People are actually going to do. My life is ruined. Does anybody understand how ruined my life is? I'm sick of it. I don't want to listen to people tell me that I'm a conspiracy theorist. They don't know what it's like to be me. My life is ruined, Al.
I mean, you are a conspiracy theorist, Laura. At some point, you're going to have to be sort of accountable for the things that you say and do publicly. So I'm not going to assume that you folks all know who Laura is. Laura obviously recently was running in a Republican primary in Florida. She lost that primary. But what she is most well known for is her beef against Jack Dorsey at Twitter, because Jack suspended her account. She is a prolific racist, a massive Islamophobe, like really hateful things against Muslims. The reason she was banned on Twitter was pretty clear to anybody that had ever occurred or come across her tweets on Twitter. So right before this happened, though, because this is the way of the world at this point, if you're a Republican, she decided that the election was stolen and that she wasn't going to concede the race. Let's play that.
I'm not conceding because I'm a winner, and the reality is our Republican Party is broken to its core. What we have done tonight has really honestly shocked the nation. We have further exposed the corruption within our own feckless, cowardly Republican Party. And that is exactly the reason why, right, I decided to run against a rhino Republican, Daniel Webster. Do you not think Daniel Webster? Yeah. I'm not conceding.
She's not conceding. And I love that she's calling her opponent a Biden Republican, because her opponent is not at all on the left. He's definitely pretty conservative. But this is like wash, rinse, repeat with Laura. She has a history of getting very angry. She has a thing that she goes, you've been Loomered, where she would set up these kind of pranks with, one with Nancy Pelosi. So not just Jack Dorsey as her target, many targets. But, this is like sort of who she is. I want to start by taking a look at her entire Twitter thing. So I'm going to play a little bit of the Periscope in which there was a live thing that was going on. She was chaining herself to Twitter headquarters in protest over her account being suspended. So let's just play the beginning part of that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Also notice she's wearing a star, and a Jewish star on her shirt, because she's basically saying that her freedom of speech is as bad as, Nuremberg, this sort of thing.
Proud of you, Laura.
Hello, everybody. My name is Laura Loomer. I'm a conservative investigative journalist, and today I'm here at Twitter in New York City to talk to you about social media censorship and the double standard that exists here at Twitter. Jack Dorsey at Twitter banned my account permanently on November 21st. I am a conservative Jewish journalist, and I was reporting facts. I was reporting facts about an Islamic congresswoman, facts about Sharia law, and now I am banned as a journalist permanently from Twitter.
All right, you get the point. So this went on for an hour and a half that she was chained herself to the door there. I think calling herself an investigative journalist is being charitable. It was absolutely hate speech, extreme Islamophobia, like crazy stuff. So that didn't come, and she had been warned multiple times. It didn't come after left field. But this is not something that only happened once. She continued to hound Jack Dorsey. So let's play this next clip.
See, you are lying about censoring conservatives. You were caught on tape by Project Veritas, shadow banning people. You were censoring people. You censored me. You censored Milo. You censored Chuck Johnson, James O'Keefe. You even censored President Trump when one of your employees deleted his account for a few minutes. You are censoring conservatives, and I'm asking you, President Donald Trump, help us. Please help us, Mr. President, before it is too late, because Jack Dorsey is trying to influence the election, to sway the election so that the Democrats can steal the election. That is why he is censoring and shadow banning conservatives. You are a liar, Jack Dorsey. You are a liar, Jack Dorsey. You unverified me on November 15, 2017.
Officer, will you escort this young lady out, please?
Stop the bias. We are conservative Americans, not Russian bots, Jack Dorsey. Stop the bias.
Okay, you got to love the guy doing the auctioneering behind. So, but that isn't the only time she went after Dorsey. Dorsey was a guest speaker at a Bitcoin event, and she showed up there as well.
Censorship is a human rights violation. You are censoring people. You are interfering in elections like
Well, why don't we just go right to that? I was going to talk about it later.
So, obviously she really wants to get her Twitter account unsuspended. I mean, she's been dogging Dorsey now for years. And in fact, I'm suspicious that this might be why she actually ran for Congress. Let's play the ran for Congress to get unsuspended video.
We are losing our country because of big tech election interference. And I am pleading with the Republican Party to please start taking this issue seriously. Please. Because the American people deserve representation. And that's why I ran for Congress in 2020. It's why I ran for Congress in 2022. And it's why I'm going to keep fighting for all of you. I'm never going to.
I don't know. And then, of course, she can't speak to anybody at any time or to any journalist because of Twitter. Let's play that video.
say something, but Twitter and Facebook won't let me speak. Twitter and Facebook won't let me speak.
I wish I could give you an answer, but Twitter and Facebook won't let me speak.
So a journalist basically asked her a question. That was her response. I mean, come on, Laura, you can speak. You could have answered the question. You're just making everything about being suspended on Twitter. Maybe stop with the hate speech. All right, let's move on to some really funny, of course, we got to have Marjorie Taylor Green every week. Who's the enemy here? Let's start with this Marjorie Taylor Green speech that was at the recent Trump rallies that are starting to pick up speed again.
Oh, I love you too. Every single one of you. But Joe Biden has declared all of you extremists. Joe Biden has declared that half of this country are enemies of the state. Because of Joe Biden and the Democrats, Merrick Garland and the FBI, Nancy Pelosi, we're going to fire her for sure. You just heard stories. Oh, yeah. You just heard stories we should never hear in the United States of America. Never. And I want to tell you, I was in that jail, in the D.C. jail. I've been there, and I saw those men, and I saw those conditions, and I sang the national anthem with them at 9 o'clock like they do every single night. And when it comes to the part in our beautiful national anthem where we sing that the flag is still there, I want you to know they scream it, still there. Because guess what? Our flag is still there. And so is our Constitution, and so is our freedoms.
Okay, so who is the real Marjorie Taylor Green? I want to play this video that she deleted off her social media right after January 6th. And I want to contrast the two. Let's play the next one.
She's a traitor to our country. She's guilty of treason. She took an oath to protect American citizens and uphold our laws. And she gives aid and comfort to our enemies who illegally invade our land. That's what treason is. Exactly. And by our law, representatives and senators can be kicked out and no longer serve in our government. And it's a crime punishable by death, is what treason is. Nancy Pelosi is guilty of treason, and we want her out of our government. She's held her seat of power for 32 years. She's 78 years old. She is dying in Congress. We are fed up with these corrupt politicians that hang on to their power just to make themselves rich.
You know, there are some legitimate concerns with Nancy Pelosi. I would agree that she has been corrupt. I would agree that she's been there too long. You can make these legitimate concerns. But the thing with Marjorie Taylor Green is she takes it to this like next level where she's accusing people of giving aid to our enemies, meaning immigrants, like because, you know, these folks are against immigration. You're guilty of treason. Treason is punishable by death. All right. So we're going to pull out the gallows and hang Congress people now because they have a different political opinion than you. You know, I just think that Marjorie Taylor Green is, you know, she uses this really strong language to describe, you know, things that she just has a political difference about. When all the while you could make legitimate criticism against Nancy and others in office, right? This is not the way to do it. And I do think as we get closer to the next election cycle that we're going to see that kind of rhetoric ramp up. All right, so let's check in with Alan West, because he had a really crazy tweet on Twitter this week. So let's put that up. It's official. I have been invested in the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, Knights Templar. I took an oath to protect the Christians in the Holy Land. I mean, first of all, the Knights Templar, are they still a thing? You're joining a Christian crusade. What is happening here? So for folks that don't know who this organization is, I am going to put a screenshot up here of their website. They are nothing to do necessarily with the original Knights Templar. They're using that name, but basically it's a Christian Zionist group. And the Christian Zionists, I think, are particularly dangerous because they only care about the state of Israel, not because they care about Jewish people. They don't care about Jewish people. They just believe that Jesus Christ will come again if Israel exists. And they are fine if all the Jewish people perish in hell for not accepting Jesus Christ, right, as part of that trade-off. So I think it's a kind of a dangerous thing to support these folks, because the reasons that they're Zionists have nothing to do with supporting any sort of Jewishness, right? The Jewish people don't matter. It's for their own personal reasons. So can we put up that website for a second there so people can see it? Yeah, there it is. All right. So that is the website that they currently have. It's called the SMOTJ organization. You can see a lot of references there to sovereign military order of the Temple of Jerusalem, seeking God in our lives and promoting love and respect for our community, increasing understanding between religions, helping pilgrims visit holy places, and maintaining a Christian presence in the Holy Land. So, I mean, it should be quite clear to you by now what these guys are about. They're definitely not about caring about Jewish folks. But there you go. Alan West is joining the ranks of the Christian fascists this week. So there is some funny satire going around about Patriot Front. Patriot Front put out a video of them marching through Philadelphia with a very large banner. That banner was white, and it was absolutely begging to get memed. So I'm starting a new weekly segment calling it By Any Means Necessary. And this week we are looking at Patriot Front. Let's play the first one of these series. Right. So where is the clitoris as these guys are dogpiling in to march behind in their Patriot Front uniform? So that was the initial one. Then it just kind of took up speed. Let's go to the next one. Premature ejaculators assemble. And then the next one, if you touch it, we will come. Let's go to the next one. This actually might be my favorite. You can have my blow-up doll when you pry it from my cold, dead hands. You can have my blow-up doll when you pry it from my cold, dead hands. That's a good one. All right, let's do the next one. How could you come? Oh, Mom, could you come pick us up now? Mom, can you come pick us up now? So, you know, again, people are kind of poking fun at this overly, ridiculously sort of military masculine thing that's going on. 30-year-old virgins united. Anyway, so you should all get your hands on that blank slate and have at it, because it's a lot of fun. And then I'm going to leave you with my favorite satire for the week. Apparently, Marjorie Taylor Green made a guest appearance on CNN.
This is CNN breaking news.
All right, y'all. Thanks for joining me this afternoon on the Right Wing Insanity Report, and we will see you next week.